inside Pelican Bay, most secure prison in the world. Hit subscribe or you'll never know which prison secrets they'll try to bury next. Like the video if you want more truth they'll never put on the evening news, and comment your theory, because in this story nothing is as it seems. The fog rolled in heavy over Crescent City, California, swallowing the coastline in a damp shroud. From the highway, Pelican Bay State Prison looked like a fortress carved out of concrete and razor wire, its watchtowers rising above the mist like sentinels. To most people it was a place they only heard about in whispers, a cage for the worst of the worst. But on a cold January morning in 2011, Pelican Bay became the center of a mystery that would shake even its hardened walls. It started with a body. Correctional officers making their rounds in the maximum security yard stumbled upon the lifeless form of inmate Hector Shadow Ramirez, sprawled face down on the cracked pavement. His tattoos told a story of loyalty to the Nuestra Familia, one of California's most feared prison gangs, but the knife wounds across his back told another story: betrayal. Ramirez wasn't supposed to die here. He was supposed to be untouchable. The report of his death rippled through the prison instantly. By noon, every cell door echoed with coded knocks. Messages passed from one block to another in a rhythm only insiders understood. Something big had happened, and everyone, from gang shot callers to correctional staff, knew this wasn't just a killing. It was a message. Detective Laura Stein of the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department was called in before the body was even removed. She'd seen plenty of violence spill out of Pelican Bay, but something about this felt different. Ramirez wasn't just another inmate in the system. He had been cooperating quietly with law enforcement, feeding them scraps of information about drug routes and money laundering operations that stretched from California's prison yards to the streets of Oakland and Los Angeles. The question wasn't who wanted him dead. The question was who knew enough to make it happen inside the most secure prison in the world. When Stein arrived, she noted the details like a crime scene etched in slow motion. No weapon was found nearby. No signs of a struggle. The cameras that covered the yard, normally unblinking eyes, conveniently glitched for 7 minutes around the time of the murder. That wasn't an accident. She crouched near the body, gloved hand brushing against a folded scrap of paper stuffed in Ramirez's waistband. In smeared pencil, a single line was written: "We control more than you think." The prison administration wanted the death written off as another inmate dispute, a fight over debts, a gang rivalry, the kind of violence that was routine inside Pelican Bay. But Stein pushed back. She knew better. This wasn't a brawl gone wrong, it was an execution. And executions inside Pelican Bay only happened with permission. Her first stop was the SHU, the Security Housing Unit. Endless concrete corridors, cells the size of closets, men locked away 23 hours a day. This was where the prison's most dangerous inmates were kept, many of them in solitary for years. But Stein wasn't there to look at the prisoners. She wanted to talk to the guards. Officer Marcus Delaney had been on duty the night before. His report was thin, barely a paragraph. But when pressed, his eyes gave him away. Something weighed heavy on him. He finally admitted he'd been ordered to stand down during a disturbance call moments before the cameras went out. No explanation given. No backup sent. When he returned, Ramirez was already dead. Delaney's confession confirmed Stein's worst suspicion. Someone on the inside had orchestrated this. But was it a guard, a gang, or both? As she dug deeper, the walls around her began to close in. Inmates whispered through their doors when she passed. Anonymous notes appeared on her desk warning her to back off. And then there was the phone call. Late one night, her cell phone buzzed with an unlisted number. A voice distorted by static said only one thing before hanging up. He wasn't the only one talking. The next day, Stein discovered that another inmate tied to Ramirez, Miguel Ortega, a mid-level enforcer for the Nuestra Familia, had been transferred out of Pelican Bay without paperwork, without authorization, and without a trace of where he'd gone. Prison officials swore it was a clerical error. Stein wasn't buying it. The pieces were stacking up like a puzzle with half the edges missing. A dead informant, a vanished witness, glitched cameras, and a message left on a corpse, taunting her with the reach of a power she couldn't yet see. The breakthrough came when Stein got access to Ramirez's last phone calls. Buried in hours of monitored conversations was one line he had whispered in Spanish to an unknown contact. "The keys are not in the prison. They're in the ocean." What did that mean? Smuggling routes along the coast? Offshore accounts? A meeting point? Before she could untangle the clue, the warden himself called her into his office. Papers on his desk, face cold and stiff. He told her in no uncertain terms to wrap up her investigation. The official line would be gang-on-gang violence. End of story. But as Stein left his office, her phone buzzed again. Another unlisted number. This time, no distortion. A man's voice. Come. Confident. Detective, you're chasing shadows. But if you want the truth, check the tunnels under the old SHU. That's where the bodies are buried. She froze. There weren't supposed to be tunnels under Pelican Bay. At least not anymore. And yet, when the maintenance maps were pulled, there it was. A sealed-off corridor dating back to the prison's construction. Long abandoned. Never decommissioned. At dawn, Stein convinced one reluctant guard to take her down. Flashlights flickering, the air thick with damp and rust, they pried open the corroded steel door. The stench hit first. Decay. Inside, graffiti covered the walls. Gang symbols. Names scratched in layers of dust. And then the discovery that made Stein's stomach turn, shallow graves, dug into the concrete floor. Bones. More than one set. Old but not ancient. Forgotten bodies, hidden in a prison that was supposed to control everything. But one detail made it worse. Tucked beside the remains was a fresh plastic bag, sealed, containing a modern burner phone. On its cracked screen was a single text message, timestamped just 2 days earlier. Ramirez was only the beginning. The conspiracy in the concrete. The stench of the tunnel clung to Detective Laura Stein long after she left Pelican Bay that night. She couldn't shake the image of the shallow graves, the rust-colored bones, the fresh burner phone lying like bait among the dead. Whoever had placed it there wanted her to find it. Back in her car, headlights cutting through the coastal fog, she turned the phone over in her hands. The cracked screen flickered weakly, the text message still glowing. Ramirez was only the beginning. Her instincts screamed that she was stepping into something far bigger than a single inmate murder. By morning, the prison's administration acted as if the discovery had never happened. The warden dismissed the tunnel as old construction debris. The bones, he claimed, were unverified. He ordered them sealed away pending review. Stein wasn't fooled. She'd seen the look in his eyes when she mentioned the graves. Panic, not surprise. She needed allies and she needed them fast. Her first call was to Special Agent Darren Cole from the FBI's Organized Crime Division. Cole had been trying to crack the prison gang pipeline for years, mapping how orders from inside Pelican Bay reached the streets of Los Angeles, Oakland, and even across the border. When Stein told him about the graves, there was silence on the line, followed by a quiet admission. You just stumbled into something we've been chasing for a decade. Cole met her the next day in a diner just outside Crescent City. The rain hammered against the windows as he slid a thick manila folder across the table. Inside were surveillance photos, wiretap transcripts, and charts that mapped out the reach of prison gangs. Nuestra Familia, Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family. But the lines didn't stop at the prison gates. They stretched into city councils, trucking companies, shipping ports, and even law enforcement. This isn't just about gangs, Cole said, his voice low. This is about a shadow network running the coast. Drugs, weapons, even people. Pelican Bay isn't just a prison, it's a headquarters. Stein's stomach tightened. Ramirez's cryptic line echoed in her head. The keys are not in the prison. They're in the ocean. Offshore smuggling. Shipping containers. The Pacific coast. Together, Stein and Cole went back over Ramirez's final weeks. Phone calls. Visitor logs. Commissary purchases. The trail led them to a name that kept appearing in the margins. Victor Salazar. Salazar wasn't an inmate. He was a contractor, an electrician who'd worked on maintenance inside Pelican Bay for years. No record, no background, just a steady paycheck and access to places most guards never saw. When Stein ran his financials, she found deposits, large ones, wired through shell companies tied to the docks in Long Beach. It clicked. Salazar wasn't fixing lights. He was a mule, a messenger, maybe even the one greasing the system to keep the cameras glitching when killings took place. But just as they prepared to bring him in, Salazar disappeared. His home abandoned, his truck torched in a wooded turnout off Highway 101. Inside the charred remains of the cab, Stein found something chilling. A prison ID badge that didn't belong to Salazar. It belonged to Officer Marcus Delaney, the same guard who had confessed he'd been ordered to stand down the night Ramirez was killed. Delaney swore he had nothing to do with it. When confronted, his hands trembled, his voice breaking. They told me if I didn't play along, my family would pay for it. I didn't have a choice. Who's they? Stein pressed. Delaney's eyes darted around the interrogation room, like shadows were listening. He finally leaned forward and whispered a single name. El Fantasma. The ghost. Cole stiffened. He knew the name. Rumors swirled in federal files about a figure who supposedly coordinated high-level prison gang operations along the Pacific. But no one had ever seen him. No mugshot. No fingerprints. Just a legend whispered in wiretaps, a phantom pulling strings from both sides of the prison wall. The more Stein dug, the more dangerous it became. Anonymous cars began tailing her at night. Her apartment door was found ajar, though nothing was stolen. One morning she found a Polaroid shoved under her windshield wiper, a blurry photo of her standing outside Pelican Bay, taken the day she discovered the tunnels. Written on the back, "Turn back or join Ramirez." She didn't show Cole the photo. She didn't want him to see her hands shaking. Meanwhile, inside Pelican Bay, the tension exploded. Ramirez's murder had lit a fuse. Rival gangs blamed each other, even as higher orders filtered down from El Fantasma. Stabbings broke out in the chow hall. Shanks were found hidden in laundry carts. Guards doubled shifts, but it was like trying to dam a river with paper. One night, a coded message intercepted between inmates confirmed Stein's worst fear. "The ghost will silence the detective before she silences us." Determined, Stein and Cole followed the money. The wire transfers tied to Salazar led to a shipping container company operating out of Eureka, just south of Crescent City. It looked clean, legitimate permits, busy docks, constant traffic. But a closer look at shipping manifests revealed strange gaps. Containers marked as empty that traveled back and forth between California and Mexico. When one of those containers was flagged for inspection, customs agents found more than they bargained for. Inside were crates of cell phones, weapons, and handwritten ledgers listing coded names, dates, and cash amounts. At the very bottom, taped to the steel wall, was a printed floor plan of Pelican Bay State Prison. Highlighted in red were the camera blind spots. Someone had turned the prison into a business empire, and Ramirez had been about to expose it. A riot erupted inside Pelican Bay's SHU. Inmates set fires with contraband lighters. Guards were overrun. And in the chaos, one name kept appearing on emergency radio calls: Miguel Ortega, the missing enforcer who'd supposedly been transferred. He was back. And witnesses claimed he wasn't fighting against the gangs. He was leading them. Stein raced to the prison, sirens wailing, her chest tight. This wasn't just an inmate riot, it was a coordinated play. As smoke billowed from the yard and alarms screamed across the compound, she realized the awful truth. The ghost wasn't outside, pulling strings from a distance. The ghost was inside Pelican Bay. And Ortega, the man everyone thought had vanished, was standing in the middle of the chaos, carrying out his orders. But when the riot subsided and the smoke cleared, Ortega was nowhere to be found. He had slipped through a breach in the fence, one that shouldn't have existed. And left behind in his cell, hidden beneath the mattress, was a small notebook. On the final page, written in careful, deliberate script, was a message that made Stein's blood run cold. "You're close, detective. But you're still not ready to see my face." The notebook sat heavy in Detective Laura Stein's hands. The words scrawled across the final page seemed less like a threat and more like a dare. "You're close, detective. But you're still not ready to see my face." She read it over and over, the letters etched into her mind. Whoever the ghost was, he knew her movements, her thoughts, maybe even her fears. It wasn't paranoia anymore. She was being watched. The FBI descended on Pelican Bay after the riot. Agents swarmed the prison, combing through Ortega's cell, confiscating shanks, searching for hidden routes. But Ortega himself had evaporated. No footprints outside the breach, no camera footage, no witnesses willing to talk. Cole slammed his fist against the briefing table. "It's impossible. No one disappears from Pelican Bay." Stein corrected him quietly. "Unless they're meant to." That was the first time she admitted to herself what she had suspected since the beginning. The ghost wasn't just a shadow in the gangs. He had allies in the prison administration itself. Guards. Contractors. Maybe even the warden. Ramirez hadn't been betrayed by his gang alone. He'd been sacrificed to keep the network alive. Before Stein could process it, news hit like a hammer. The investigation turned inward. Stein focused on the prison staff. Who had access? Who signed off Ortega's transfer? Who ordered the camera blackout? Every path led back to one name: Warden Richard Halloway. On paper, Halloway was a career man, 30 years in corrections, squeaky clean. But his lifestyle didn't match his salary. Offshore accounts, properties under shell companies, and a yacht moored quietly in Crescent City Harbor. A vessel that had made multiple fishing trips, aligning perfectly with the shipping route Stein and Cole had uncovered. The ghost wasn't some faceless inmate hiding behind codes. The ghost was the man running Pelican Bay itself. Stein confronted Cole with the evidence late one night in the FBI's field office. He didn't want to believe it, but the pattern was undeniable. Holloway had been using the prison as both a cover and a fortress. He wasn't just profiting off gangs, he was orchestrating them. The killings, the riots, the disappearances, they weren't chaos. They were strategy. And Ortega? He wasn't the ghost. He was a lieutenant. The muscle. The distraction. The real power wore a suit, not shackles. Stein knew the danger of accusing a sitting warden without airtight proof. She needed him caught in the act. So she took the risk. Posing as Ramirez's sister, she arranged a meeting through Salazar's old contacts on the docks. A payoff exchange was scheduled, cash for silence. If Holloway showed, they'd have him. The night was cold, the ocean restless. Stein waited in an abandoned warehouse near the pier, microphone wire taped against her skin, Cole and a team hidden in surveillance vans outside. Hours passed. The only sound was waves breaking against steel pilings. Then headlights cut across the dark. A black SUV rolled in. The door opened. And Warden Holloway stepped out, calm as if he were walking into his office. He carried no guards, no entourage. Just a briefcase. "Detective Stein," he said, voice smooth, almost cordial. "I was hoping you'd be here." Her blood ran cold. He knew. He'd known all along. "You killed Ramirez," she spat. "You orchestrated Ortega's escape. You've been running this prison like your personal empire." Holloway almost smiled. "Detective, you still don't get it. I didn't build an empire. I inherited it. Pelican Bay was designed to control men, but control is just another word for power. Someone had to keep the chaos in order." He set the briefcase on the ground. Snapped it open. Bundles of cash gleamed in the half-light. "This is bigger than gangs. Bigger than you. Walk away and no one will ever touch you." For a moment, Stein's pulse faltered. The money. The power. The promise of safety. She thought of Ramirez, Ortega, the graves in the tunnels. And then she thought of the Polaroid slipped under her windshield. "Join Ramirez." She steadied her voice. "You're done, Holloway." She reached for the wire under her collar, only to realize with horror that her earpiece was silent. The vans hadn't moved. The backup hadn't come. Cole wasn't answering. Holloway's smile widened. "You see, Detective, I told you. You weren't ready to see my face. Because the moment you did, it meant you were already part of the story." Behind her, footsteps echoed. Ortega stepped out of the shadows, shiv glinting in his hand. The next moments blurred into chaos. Stein lunged sideways as Ortega slashed, the blade cutting through her jacket. She drew her gun, fired, one shot then another. Ortega dropped, clutching his side, blood pooling beneath him. Holloway didn't flinch. He simply closed the briefcase and walked calmly toward the SUV. Stein raised her weapon, finger trembling on the trigger. "Do it," he said. "But it won't change a thing. The ghost isn't a man. The ghost is a system. And you can't put a system in handcuffs." Then he slipped into the SUV and vanished into the fog. By the time backup finally arrived, Ortega was unconscious and bleeding but alive. The notebook, the cash, the container evidence, all of it tied the operation to the prison. But Holloway himself? He was gone. No trace, no digital footprint, no trail. Officially, the FBI reported the case as gang-related corruption. Ortega was charged. Salazar's death was pinned on rival factions. And the warden? He resigned quietly, citing health reasons, and disappeared into retirement. Stein knew the truth though. Weeks later, as she packed up her case files, another envelope appeared on her desk. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed Holloway smiling on a yacht, somewhere in international waters. On the back, written in the same deliberate script as before. "You put one ghost in the ground. But how many more will you chase?" That night, Stein sat in her car overlooking the ocean. The waves rolled endlessly against the shore, carrying secrets in their tide. She realized the fight wasn't over. Might never be. Ramirez had been right. The keys weren't in the prison. They were in the ocean. In the ports, the smuggling lanes, the invisible currents of money and power that flowed beneath the surface. Pelican Bay wasn't the most secure prison in the world. It was the most secure illusion. And the ghost still walked free. They thought the ghost had been unmasked. But 3 months later, another inmate turned up dead inside Pelican Bay, with the same message scrawled on his body. "We control more than you think." If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe because the shadows of crime don't sleep, and neither do we.